My parents forced me to lose weight for my sister's wedding, but after my transformation, they couldn't handle my success. My parents made it clear I had to slim down for my sister's wedding. But once I actually pulled it off and changed my life, they couldn't deal with how well I'd done. Growing up, I was always the chubby kid. From my earliest school days, I was noticeably bigger than the other kids in my class. While the other kids were still figuring out what made them special, my size already set me apart. As I got older, the extra weight I carried became even more obvious. By the time I hit high school, there was no denying it. I was overweight, and my body was a constant reminder that I didn't quite fit in. College wasn't any better. While a lot of folks were figuring themselves out, trying new things, and branching out, I stayed stuck with the same old identity, the fat kid, sometimes battling it, sometimes just trying to get through the day. Being bigger than everyone else wasn't just tough, it was exhausting. It opened me up to nonstop teasing, rude jokes, and nasty looks from people who didn't care enough to understand what I was going through. I got bullied more than I'd ever want to remember. My classmates were relentless with the teasing. Their words cut deep. Over time, their insults chipped away at whatever confidence I had left, leaving behind a mess of insecurity and self-doubt. They'd call me all kinds of names, make mean jokes, and more often than not, I was the butt of them. I always felt like I was being targeted, like I wasn't good enough for kindness or friendship. I got left out of everything: games, birthday parties, sleepovers. It always felt like I was watching life happen from the sidelines, unable to join in. Those years really shaped how I saw myself, and how I interacted with the world. I felt like I didn't belong, so I turned to books to escape. Reading became my safe place. I'd lose myself in stories where no one cared about my weight. Books never made fun of me. They didn't judge. People started calling me the nerd, and to be honest, it didn't feel like a compliment. My little sister, Bonnie, was nothing like me. She was just a year younger, but she had this magnetic energy that pulled people in without even trying. Bonnie could light up a room the second she walked in. She was outgoing, friendly, always cracking jokes and making people laugh. Everyone loved being around her. Bonnie didn't just make friends, she had this natural way of getting people to rally around her, like she was the sun and the rest of us were just orbiting. Even though we were so different, I absolutely adored her. As her older sister, I felt this strong need to look out for her. When she started going to the same high school as me, I was thrilled. For a while, being Bonnie's big sister gave me a sense of pride, like I held a special place in her life. But as time went on, something changed. As Bonnie settled into high school and started forming her own identity, she began seeing just how different we were, and how people treated us differently. I was still the shy, bookish girl, while she quickly became part of the popular crowd. I noticed the way she started picking up on my quirks and insecurities, the same ones that made me stick out in the worst ways. And slowly, she started pulling away. Eventually, she didn't just distance herself, she started flat out ignoring me at school. That stung more than I expected. It broke my heart, honestly, to feel like my own sister thought I wasn't good enough to be around. Still, I tried to respect her space. If that's what she needed, I figured I'd let her have it, even if it felt like I was losing a sister and a friend all at once. But it didn't stop there. Bonnie didn't just ignore me, she joined in with the same kind of people who made my life miserable. She and her new group of friends would go out of their way to make me feel even more isolated. They'd humiliate me in the halls or during lunch. Sometimes they tried to trip me when I walked by with my tray, just to get a laugh out of the crowd. It was like I wasn't just losing Bonnie to new friends, I was watching her turn into someone who treated me the way bullies always had. I had to stay on guard all the time, not just because of what other kids might do or say, but because I never knew when my own sister might join in. That kind of pain hits different, especially when it comes from someone you always looked up to. When Bonnie had her friends over at our house, things got worse. They'd burst into my room without knocking, pointing and laughing at my body like I was some kind of freak show. They tossed out names like geek and fatty, like it was nothing. I felt like an animal at the zoo, something to gawk at and mock. In my own room, in what was supposed to be my private space, I felt exposed and alone, like I didn't even belong in my own home. I tried to talk to my parents about it. I really hoped they'd understand how hard it was for me to deal with Bonnie's behavior. But every time I brought it up, they brushed it off. They'd smile and say it was just siblings messing around, that Bonnie was only teasing. They told me I was being too sensitive, that I needed to lighten up and stop taking everything so seriously. They said since I was older, I should be the mature one, the patient one. So not only was I getting bullied at school, and at home by my own sister, but the people who were supposed to protect me didn't even take me seriously. It made me feel completely alone, like nobody in my family truly saw how much I was hurting. The only time I ever really felt like my parents noticed me was when I brought home good grades. School came easy to me, and I always did well academically. In some ways, it was the one thing I had that made me feel worth something. It was the only part of me that seemed to make my parents proud. They'd talk me up to family and friends, calling me the smart one, the scholar, like my grades were some kind of trophy that proved they'd done a good job raising me. But Bonnie hated being compared to me. She wasn't into school the way I was, and she didn't care about getting straight A's. Still, our parents couldn't help but hold up my grades as some gold standard, as if Bonnie was supposed to follow in my footsteps. I could always tell Bonnie held some kind of grudge. She seemed irritated and jealous a lot, and maybe that's what pushed her to do what she did. Every now and then she'd go out of her way to sabotage something I had worked hard on, like it was her way of getting even. There were nights when she'd sneak into my room while I was asleep and snatch my homework, always right before a big assignment was due. I'd wake up the next morning, feeling good and ready to turn it in, only to find it gone. Panic would hit me like a freight train. I'd tear apart my desk, flip through folders, scatter papers everywhere, desperately trying to find it. And there she'd be, leaning against the doorframe with a smug little grin, watching me fall apart. She loved every second of it. For her, it wasn't just a prank, it was a way to knock me down a few steps. She knew how important school was to me, how much of my self-esteem was tied up in my grades, and she took pleasure in shaking that foundation. I didn't even find out the full truth until years later, when she let it slip during a drunken night. She admitted she used to steal my assignments just to mess with me. Over the years, things between Bonnie and me have mellowed a bit, but we're still not what you'd call close. I guess we've both grown up some, and a lot of the bitterness from back then has faded, but that deep sibling bond people talk about never really happened for us. After I graduated, I packed up and started fresh in a new city. I had a solid job, new friends, and a life that felt like it was finally my own. Because of that, I didn't get to see my family all that often anymore. As time passed, we mostly kept in touch through the occasional phone call or a random text here and there. So when I finally planned a summer trip back home last year, I was genuinely looking forward to it. It had been ages since we were all under the same roof, and I was excited to catch up, laugh a little, maybe reconnect with everyone. At first, the family lunch seemed to be going smoothly. Everyone looked happy to see me, and for a moment, it almost felt like the good old days. That changed in an instant when Bonnie dropped the news: she was engaged. Nobody had expected it, and we all kind of froze for a second, thinking she was messing with us. But she wasn't. She held out her hand with a huge grin, showing off this beautiful ring, and I told her how stunning it looked. I meant it too, I was truly happy for her. She had found someone she loved, someone who clearly loved her back, and I was glad for her. But the mood shifted again almost right after. Bonnie turned to me and asked how things were going on my end. I started talking about my job, the life I'd built, how fulfilling it all had become. Before I could even finish, she cut me off with a smirk. "I mean, if things are so great," she said, laughing, "why are you still fat?" Then she added, "LOL. If your life's really that amazing, shouldn't you be in better shape by now?" It felt like she had slapped me in front of everyone. All those insecurities I thought I'd outgrown suddenly came rushing back. The room went dead quiet. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, like they were waiting to see what I'd say. I tried to play it off with a weak laugh and a shrug, but then my parents jumped in, and somehow made it worse. They started talking about how I was still overweight, unmarried, and how they were beginning to worry that I might never have kids. I wanted to disappear. It was like none of the things I'd worked hard for, my job, my independence, the progress I'd made, mattered to them. All they could focus on was how I looked and the fact that I didn't have a husband or children. As they kept talking, their words hit harder and harder. I'd spent years growing into someone confident and sure of herself, but right then, I felt like I'd been yanked back to being that awkward, anxious teenager all over again. I found myself desperate for approval, still wanting them to accept me. Then they turned their attention back to Bonnie, praising her for getting engaged before me, going on about how proud they were. And there I was, still the underachiever in their eyes. Successful, sure. But never quite enough. That lunch, which I'd hoped would feel warm and welcoming, turned into a harsh reminder of all the old wounds I thought had healed. Bonnie didn't let up either. She kept pushing. "So," she said with a grin, "when are you getting married? Do you even have a boyfriend?" She was clearly trying to embarrass me in front of everyone, mocking my love life, or lack of one. And once again, my parents chimed in like a tag team. They agreed with her, and said maybe it was time I settled down. They pointed out how Bonnie, even though she was younger, was already on the path to starting a family, while I was wasting my time working too much and going home to an empty apartment. I tried to explain. I told them I liked the life I had. I liked the freedom and the success I'd built on my own. My job paid well, I was passionate about it, and I wasn't lacking anything just because I didn't have a partner or kids. "I'm happy as I am," I said honestly. But it didn't seem to land. Especially not with my mom. She gave me this sharp, disapproving look and asked, "What's the point of making all that money if there's no one waiting for you at home?" It felt like she couldn't even imagine a version of happiness that didn't involve being married. Sitting there, I felt that same old loneliness, The same sense of being misunderstood and unappreciated. This was my family. They were supposed to know me, love me, support me. But instead, they were stuck on this narrow idea of what happiness is supposed to look like. I'd come home hoping for connection and maybe a little warmth. Instead, I got judged, mocked, and picked apart. Then Bonnie threw in one more jab with a smirk. "You better at least bring a +1 to my wedding," she said, laughing. "I don't want people thinking my sister's some old miserable woman, all alone while I'm tying the knot." That one hurt more than I let on. I just nodded and said I'd try. That's when my parents joined back in, like they were handing down instructions. "Bonnie's wedding is almost a year away," they said. "Even if you don't find a partner, you should at least try to lose some weight and look decent for the big day." They told me that dropping a few pounds might even help me attract someone. Bonnie, of course, chimed in with, "Yeah, I want you to lose a few pounds at least. You'll feel better, and you'll look better in the pictures." Like she was doing me a favor. I sat there at that table, stunned. Embarrassed in a way I hadn't felt in years. How could my own family talk to me like that? Did being overweight somehow make me less human in their eyes? Was I not allowed to feel pain just because I didn't look the way they wanted me to? I was just a regular person, same as them. I had feelings. I functioned like anyone else. I never thought of my weight as something that held me back, so I couldn't understand why they saw it that way. I'd even dated guys before, guys who liked me exactly as I was. But to my parents and Bonnie, it was like my body was the one thing stopping me from being loved. And that just wasn't true. I wanted to speak up, to tell them how wrong they were, how much it hurt, but I couldn't get the words out. I just froze, trapped in that old familiar feeling of being a teenager again, picked apart for something I never asked for. They dragged up my biggest insecurities so casually, like my pain didn't matter. So I sat there, swallowed it down, and let the conversation move on like nothing happened. When I got back home from that trip, something inside me flipped. I felt this fire I hadn't felt in a long time. At first, I was driven by the idea of proving them wrong. But somewhere along the way, it became about something much bigger than that. I started hitting the gym. Got on a strict meal plan. Hired a personal trainer who totally understood where I was coming from. She had gone through her own journey, lost weight, got healthy, and she knew how to guide me without judgment. She created a plan that worked for me and kept reminding me to be kind to myself if I slipped up. For once, everything just started to click. The weight started coming off, and with it, this heaviness I didn't even realize I was carrying, mentally, emotionally. I started seeing real change, not just in how I looked, but how I felt. I felt stronger, clearer, more myself. Confidence started growing in ways I didn't expect. I used to think losing weight wouldn't really change how I felt inside, but it did. People treated me differently. Strangers smiled more, people listened more, even coworkers and friends started seeing me with new eyes. It's hard to admit, but it felt good, like I was finally being seen. For the first time in my life, I stood out in a way that didn't feel like a joke. I gave my closet a full makeover, ditched the oversized clothes I used to hide behind and started wearing the kinds of outfits I'd only dreamed about before. I even went bold with my hair, something edgy, stylish, way outside my comfort zone. Maybe it sounds a little over the top, but for once, I actually liked the person I saw in the mirror. Sometimes I'd catch myself just staring, almost not recognizing who I'd become. Not because of the weight, but because I finally saw someone who believed in herself. Bonnie's wedding was now just 2 weeks away, and my parents had invited me to fly in early for lunch to help finalize the plans. But I wasn't excited. I didn't want to walk back into that house only to be judged again. Not when I was finally feeling good about myself, maybe for the first time in my life. I wasn't sure I even wanted to go to the wedding. Not after everything they'd said and done. But deep down, I knew if I didn't show up, I'd catch hell for it. They'd guilt-trip me about family being family, and how I had to be there for Bonnie's big day, no matter how I felt inside. So Reddit, am I the jerk if I skip my sister's wedding? Update 1. Wow. I'm honestly overwhelmed by all your responses. Some of your suggestions had me laughing out loud. I can't believe so many of you are actually encouraging me to show up and make my sister eat her words now that I've dropped the weight. Growing up as the fat kid really did a number on my self-worth. I spent years thinking I wasn't enough. That I wasn't worthy of being noticed or loved. But reading your replies, it's like something clicked. You helped me see myself differently. For the first time, I'm starting to feel genuinely confident, like maybe I am enough, exactly as I am. And now, I'm seriously considering showing up to that family lunch. Unannounced. They haven't seen me in a while. I'm not on social media, so they don't know what I look like now. And I've gotta admit, I'm kinda excited to see their faces. Update 2. Alright, buckle up, because this next part's wild. I decided to do it. I booked a flight and went to that lunch. And let me tell you, it did not disappoint. When I walked through the front door of my parents' house, their faces said it all. Jaw dropped. They were just staring at me, mouths open, eyes wide, like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. It took them a second to even say anything. When they finally did, they asked if it was really me. I smiled and gave them a big hug, soaking it all in. They kept showering me with compliments, telling me how amazing I looked, how proud they were. It was the first time I'd ever heard anything like that from them. Then Bonnie walked in. And everything changed. At first, she didn't even notice me. Same old Bonnie, barely glanced my way, acted like I wasn't even in the room. But when I stood up to say hi, she stopped in her tracks. She stared at me for a second, eyes going wide, then let out this weird, awkward laugh. She walked up and actually poked my stomach, like she needed proof that it was real. My parents burst out laughing at her reaction, telling her they'd had the same one. We all sat down for lunch, and the whole conversation revolved around me and how I'd changed. They asked 100 questions, how I did it, how long it took, what kind of diet I followed. Their surprise was almost funny, like they couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that I'd transformed into someone new. Bonnie especially kept repeating how she never thought I'd change this much. And then she said something that hit different. When I first told you to lose weight, she said, kind of half laughing, I never expected you to end up looking this pretty. She looked me up and down and said, I didn't even know you had a jawline like that. And your ankles, who knew they were hiding under all that weight? I paused, forcing myself to keep calm. I smiled politely and replied, Bonnie, I've always been pretty. Losing the weight just helped bring out the features that were already there. But she wouldn't let it go. Bonnie insisted there had to be something more going on. Seriously though? She asked, tilting her head. Did you get any work done? Like surgery or something? Because there's just no way you look this good naturally. I could feel the heat rising up in my chest. That stung more than I expected. The fact that she couldn't even imagine I'd achieved this through sheer grit and determination, it made my blood boil. I looked her right in the eye and said, Wow, Bonnie. It's honestly wild that you think so little of me. No, I didn't get surgery. It's called hard work and learning how to love myself. Maybe try that sometime. Her face shifted instantly, from shock to annoyed, but I didn't care. Saying that felt good. For once, I got to speak up and hold my own. Before she could say anything back, my parents tried to jump in and play the peacemakers in their own awkward way. Mom said, Sweetheart, you shouldn't take offense. It's just, none of us have ever seen you like this before. Honestly, you look more beautiful than Bonnie now, and she's the one getting married. Bonnie's face turned sour immediately. Her smile dropped, and she just stared at our mom, clearly pissed. I didn't even flinch. I went right back to eating my food while Bonnie sat there stewing in her jealousy. Then, as if she couldn't help herself, Mom piped up again. You know, she said, eyeing my hair, I've been thinking. Maybe you should go back to your natural color. This blonde thing makes you stand out too much. You'd look even prettier if you just stuck to your original brunette shade. And just like that, my dad chimed in too. Yeah, he said, nodding along. Bonnie's always been the blonde one in the family. You were the brunette. It just kind of suits you better, you know? I blinked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Suddenly, the three of them were ganging up on me, trying to tear me down after everything I'd accomplished. The blonde hair wasn't even about them. My stylist had recommended it because it matched my skin tone better, brought out my features. It had nothing to do with trying to copy or compete with Bonnie. Sure, I looked good now, and I understood why Bonnie might feel threatened by that. But what confused me most was my parents' reaction. Why were they upset? They were the ones who had pressured me into becoming more presentable for this wedding in the first place. And now that I'd done exactly that, they were uncomfortable with the result? Instead of cheering me on, they were acting like they wanted the old me back, the one who stayed quiet, stayed in the background, and never dared to outshine their precious Bonnie. I finally snapped. Why does this bother you so much? I asked them, my voice sharp. What, am I not allowed to be blonde now? Is that some kind of title she owns? No, she doesn't. I can wear my hair however the hell I want. It's my head. My life. Why does it even matter to you? They didn't answer right away. Just looked at me like I was being difficult. Then Mom said it, something I'll never forget. You're trying to make yourself the center of attention at her wedding. That's what this is about. You're trying to stand out. Bonnie nodded, crossing her arms. You already lost all that weight and now you're taking my hair color too? Seriously? And just like always, Dad sided with them. You're being unreasonable, he said. As her sister, you should be more understanding. This isn't about you. I sat there, staring at the three of them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't about trying to steal anything. It wasn't about being the center of attention. It was about doing something for me. For once in my life. I wasn't trying to ruin anything. I was finally happy, finally confident. And instead of celebrating that, they were trying to make me feel bad about it. They weren't proud. They were threatened. I leaned back, took a deep breath, and said, "You know what? I'm done with this." My voice cracked slightly, but I didn't care. "The three of you are so wrapped up in your own negativity, you can't even see how much I've grown. I've always been enough," I told them. "I've always had something special inside me, but none of you ever noticed. And now that I've changed, now that I finally feel good about myself, it's still not enough for you." They just stared. Nobody said a word. But it didn't matter. Because for once, I didn't need their approval. I was finally done holding back. Since they had so much to say about me, I figured it was about time I gave them a little unsolicited advice of my own, just like they always loved doing to me. I turned to my mom first. The words were sitting heavy in my chest, and once I started, they just poured out. "Mom," I said, steady but blunt, "I really hate the way the skin around your eyes and mouth sags when you laugh. And your teeth, they're crooked. Honestly, it's hard not to notice, and it grosses me out." She blinked, stunned silent. I didn't wait for her to react. Next, I looked my dad straight in the eye. "Dad," I said, my voice sharp, "you're bald. So maybe you should be the last person criticizing anyone about their hair, or what color it is. You've got nothing up there. Not exactly in a position to be judging, are you?" I could see his jaw tighten, but I wasn't finished. Then I turned to Bonnie. "And you, don't you ever talk down to me again," I said, my tone like ice. "You've always acted like you were the pretty one. But let's be real, between the two of us, I've always had the better features. Now that I've dropped the weight, you actually look bigger than me. Just take a look at those chubby arms." Bonnie's face turned bright red. Her lip trembled, and for a second, I thought she might cry. I didn't stick around to see if she would. I raised my glass, took a long sip, then finished the rest in one go. Without saying another word, I stood up, smirked, and walked right out, leaving them all sitting there stunned, silent, and stewing in their own judgment. I had said everything I'd been holding back for years. And you know what? I couldn't believe it had actually come out of my mouth, but I didn't regret a single word. They'd spent years tearing me down, picking apart my body, my life, my worth. So yeah, they deserved to feel a little bit of what they'd been dishing out. After that train wreck of a lunch, I caught the next flight home. There was no way in hell I was going to stick around for Bonnie's wedding. And since then, my phone hasn't stopped buzzing. Voicemails, text messages, mostly from my parents and Bonnie, all furious about how disrespectful and foul-mouthed I'd been. They were more upset about how I left than the years they spent humiliating me. Mom even had the nerve to say I needed to come back and attend the wedding because it would look bad in front of Bonnie's in-laws if I didn't show up. Update 3. So, I skipped Bonnie's wedding. Thanks to all your encouragement, instead of dragging myself back into that mess, I booked myself a last-minute staycation at a beautiful resort. And honestly, it was one of the best decisions I've made in a long, long time. No family drama. No fake smiles. No judgmental stares. Just me, doing whatever I wanted. I spent the weekend getting pampered at the spa, caught up on shows I'd been too busy to watch, and even explored a few new spots in the city that I'd been meaning to check out for months. It was peaceful. It was joyful. It was exactly what I needed. And as for my family? I blocked them. All of them. I'm done being their emotional punching bag. Done playing the role of the family scapegoat. Right now, my focus is on protecting my peace and taking care of me. So thank you, for listening, for supporting, and for reminding me I'm not alone. And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and tap the notification bell. More real-life stories are on the way, stories that'll make you laugh, cry, and maybe even see your own life a little clearer. Because out here, there are a lot of us finally choosing ourselves. And that's worth celebrating.